But what does that mean when what you and Melissa are doing in that photo? You guys
Oh,
do that in a lot of photos.
oh, this one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that one.
Melissa, do you want to share what that is?
So when you put your thumb and forefinger together like this, it creates a little heart, and you can put it right by your cheek, and it makes you look really cute in photos. It's a Korean heart.
Oh, yeah.
I
It's actually a really technical whitewater skill. And if you can't master this, it's going to be really hard to move on.
Climb up your
I thought it
skill.
meant this is just another expensive sport and you're just like, like holding money or something.
It's like, here's another $400
Yeah,
paddle.
there it goes.
All right, so here is number 10. It will enhance your edging. So I think folks mentioned this. Um, yeah, in sea kayaking, you you can go your whole career like not really edging. You can enjoy sea kayaking not edging. If you want to do it more efficiently and really manage your boat and yourself well in advanced environments, I'd argue that edging is essential, but you don't have to. Whereas in whitewater kayaking, you must edge. The river and current will punish you for not edging, and it also will build a sense for more intuitively edging. Um, so that is number 10. And I apologize, you might hear my son crying in the background. It's his bedtime and he's teething and he's having a little bit of a hard time. Cool. Melissa, anything to add on the edging front?
Yeah, I feel like with the whitewater boats being a bit more sensitive, um, it really forces paddlers to be a lot more engaged with their core and understanding not just what's happening with their arms as they're using their paddle, but really figuring out how to use all of your muscle groups and use your whole body to make strokes, which helps one paddle more effectively, and then two, it helps with fatigue and longevity. So as you're learning how to keep your entire body engaged and use all your muscle groups and your strokes that you have to do more often in whitewater kayaking, I feel like that directly translates over to sea kayaking. And so when you're doing the longer paddles and things like that, you're not just relying on the little muscles in your arm, but instead your whole body.
Oh, yeah. And you might notice some familiar faces. There's some Baskers who have already been with us on the river. So I was hoping Jim Ferris was going to join this meeting because this is his first ever whitewater lesson. And just last week, he became a whitewater instructor. So watch out. It's literally and figuratively a slippery slope. Okay, next one. All right, number 9. It will improve your surfing. And Melissa, this is you surfing here. Is this the Locksaw?
Yep, the wave's called Pipeline, and it's in its certain flows, and it's just this big, beautiful, glassy standing wave it never ends. It's the eternal wave. And that is one perk to surfing on the river, is that you don't have to wait for the waves. They're just there.
And they don't sneak up behind you. You see them coming.
Yep.
So one of I'll admit it, like I don't think I was really surfing that well in a sea kayak until I really unlocked how to surf in a whitewater kayak better and more efficiently. So when you're on a river, just as Melissa mentioned, the wave for the most part is pretty consistent. And when you're on the ocean, every wave is different. The way it unfolds its energy is going to be different, wildly different day to day, different every 20 minutes as the tide cycle changes. Not so much the case. So if you're really wanting to isolate different variables, especially better understanding your edges, your rudders, how effective they are, you're going to get really consistent and great feedback to isolate those variables on a river wave. on a standing wave in the river. It really also helped me. I mostly am kayak surfing or longboat surfing in a Virgo. And if you look at a lot of the modern sea kayaks these days and compare that to some of the edgier whitewater boats, the hulls are increasingly looking the same. And so when I really took the time to dial in how to surf the scorch better and then translated a lot of those techniques to my Virgo, it helped a ton. Um, and I could also play with different variables and really know with precision that that was the variable that was influencing some outcome on the river. So big shout out to river surfing. Melissa, is there anything you'd want to add on that front?
Yeah, I think it just, going back to edging and edge control, if it just the repetition and being able to just come off a wave and get back on and not have to wait for sets, and you just keep getting to work that core control, that edge control, and all the techniques that come into play with surfing that directly translates with your technique, especially looking at sea kayaking in more dynamic rough water.
Um, and the other benefit is people aren't going to yell at you, which is really nice. And you're not going to like almost take somebody who's standing in knee-deep water out when you're side surfing into the beach. So there's a safety element there for you and others involved.
It's a different culture. Everyone sits in the eddy and cheers for each other. People don't get upset if you got their wave because the wave's just there.
Oh, yeah. Henry, you do bring up a good point. Henry in the chat mentioned you have to watch out for rafts. And I think that gets into etiquette. So there is a river etiquette when you're surfing a wave or peeling out of an eddy, similar to there is surf etiquette. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but yeah, rafts kind of like, the law of tonnage often applies on the river as well. So they kind of went out on that one. Yeah. Has anyone here surfed river waves? Feel free to use the chat and just say like, I've surfed a river wave. Yes, we are speed bump.
Yeah, barking dog.
Woo! Yeah. Okay. Ooh, play parks. Yep. Yeah, the gremlin wave.
It's a great one with a big, big, big flat pool behind it.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go down. Oh, in a galaxy far away. All right. So number 8, it will improve your rock gardening moves. So I reused this photo, now I'm realizing it, and that's not great. But I like the juxtaposition of these two images because it shows you that movement of water, and especially on the other end, what's happening and how that impacts your boat. So on the left one, that's a stretch of the South Yuba, and that's a rapid called Tombstone. And I'm trying to boof. I've clearly put a little too much edge into it. And then on the right, you see my partner Julian, and that's Goat Rock going off of a pour over. But the way that you have the dynamics of the hydraulic with the water moving over the rock is pretty similar. Um, so you can really apply a lot of the same stroke techniques if you're committing to your pour overs or other types of rock gardening moves. And even if you're not in a short boat, even if you're in a long boat too, it just takes a lot better timing and understanding what the water is doing with the feature. But uh, really using your whole body, as Melissa was saying, and having that verticality and that timing with your strokes, that's something that you can really hone on the river. I find that if you're wanting to make big moves in rock gardening and practice something like a boof or going over a pour over, you have to wait a long time, right? Who all here has been like sitting in a line and then feeling really self-conscious about how many people are waiting behind them to go over the same pour over, that you're just like, okay, I'm just gonna take the next wave. And then you get stuck and you're high and dry and it's embarrassing. And then there's so many photos of you on the rock, right? And the benefit, again, similar to surfing a standing wave, is that the current's consistently going in. And there are a lot of places where you can attain up the rapid or the river or walk your boat up and try the same move and master it over and over again. So you can work on those details in a way that you have to be really patient or even more committed in a sea kayaking environment. So, so there's that ease of like building your comfort in doing those types of moves in those places, but also you really learn to like commit yourself. In whitewater, the current's gonna continuously move you. And sometimes you're like, well, I can't fight the current. I just got to go with it and make the best of hitting this hole or this hydraulic or going over this rock or between these rocks. And you're forced to commit in a way, even if it's like not a very high consequence area, that in sea kayaking you could easily back away. You could say, actually, not for me, not today, right? And it builds that muscle of commitment that you can translate onto the ocean and especially in rock gardening. Melissa, do you wanna weigh in on this at all?
Yeah, I definitely notice when I go out sea kayaking and around people that are just really obsessed with, getting all the features and rock gardening and wanting to session things. I'm always just sitting there going, well, come to the river. It's all rock gardening, it's all dynamic. And like Laura said, with the commitment side of things, I think that really does a lot just in terms, not for just your mental game for paddling more dynamic, rough water, but also just just in life in general, being able to be in a position where you have to run something, and depending on the level of whitewater you're in, it's, oftentimes, if you're learning, they're going to be lower consequence areas with big pools afterwards, and on up. But I really feel like not just training your body, with those techniques and skills, but also your mental game with those techniques and skills, and giving yourself the opportunity to step up to these kinds of features and things that might be a little scary over and over again in a in that kind of environment does a lot just for your life, really. So kayaking also helps your life, just but you all know that.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think too, uh, thinking about what you just said, Melissa.
Oh,
Oh, oh yeah. Can you hear me okay?
good.
Oh, thinking about what you just
Yep.
said about like, you know, the consequences of, you know, trying these moves or like being forced to make decisions a little faster in a whitewater environment. I think you can reap the benefits of like paddling around rocks and gaining that comfort, making decisions on the fly, especially in certain rivers and certain rapids where there's this idea of actual risk and perceived risk. Um, and a lot of times on like certain rivers, there's a lot more perceived risk than actual risk. But you can gain a lot from navigating that and building that comfort in that section. And sometimes I find that in sea kayaking, there's some instances where it's a little reversed, where the actual risk for a certain feature is more than the perceived risk. And so it's really useful to start building that recognition of actual and perceived in both environments. And you're able to, I think, push yourself to practice perhaps more committing moves in a whitewater environment that has less actual risk than I see folks practicing committing moves in sea kayaking, where there's perhaps a little bit more like more actual risk than perceived risk. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. If you are learning on, say, a class 2 feature, which is, you know, just a quick definition, class 2 is, requires some navigation, but it's generally pretty forgiving with, consequences on the lower side. And being really able to hone your skills, there's going to be a lot less variables than when you're out rock gardening, because it's going to stay fairly consistent. You know what to expect. So it's a really good venue to practice those moves, skills, and techniques over and over again in an environment that you can anticipate what the next move is going to be and what the consequences are going to be. Instead of having a bigger swell come through and all of a sudden this pour over that you wanted to run is all of a sudden humongous, and there's a lot more going on. If you're putting on a class 2 section and you're learning how to make these moves in an environment that you can predict, there's a lot more predictability. It's a lot easier to learn, and then those skills will directly translate back to your rock gardening. And then just to address super quick Gail's question in terms of, she said, do you find that you have to plan your lines more on whitewater than sea kayaking? And that, yes and no. In rock gardening, you have a lot more time to just sit there and look at a feature on over and over and over again and watch the swell comes in. You can watch other people do it. You can sit on the outside. Where whitewater, you can take eddies, you can stop and pause. But as you're moving downstream, you are having to read the water as you're moving. And again, this becomes, as you get into more complex whitewater, your ability to read the water also improves as well the more time you spend with it. It's a mileage thing. So obviously, same as in sea kayaking, you start a little more simple, a little lower consequence, and you work your way up. Same thing in whitewater, and you just get to a point where you can read the water fairly quickly. I put on a section the other day, and there was 3, pretty nice class 5 gorges, and none of us knew it. And being able to get to a horizon line and drop into something and read that level of whitewater that quickly just comes with time and mileage and experience. And yeah, I think it's really, really helpful.
And I want to add to what Melissa just said. Like, there's an analogy that I think it might have been Mary Dreamer who shared this analogy, where when you're finding your line on the fly or you're reading a river as you're paddling it, it's kind of like being a musician reading sheet music, right? For anyone who's ever played the flute or the violin or anything that requires sheet music, you're not just focusing on what you're playing in the moment, which is akin to what strokes you're actually making in the moment, but you're always a few notes ahead so you can keep in track with the orchestra, with the symphony, right? And that's what you're doing on the river and in a lot of dynamic sea kayaking environments. It's the same muscle that you're working out in both environments. It's being able to register and have that pattern recognition for not just what's immediately in front of you, but 2 to 3 moves ahead. And developing that experience and that muscle through experience. So I love that analogy. I find that you can really work that muscle a ton in current and on the river in a way that you have to really seek out very dynamic environments in sea kayaking to do. And also just bracing, right? A lot of times the sea kayaking, you'll have not every day is and every paddle is 100% on the top end of all the conditions, right? You're not putting on and then immediately like, okay, 5 knots of current, wave, 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 8 knots of current, poof, 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 right? In a way that a river is a little bit more full on in that way. And so all of the strokes are that you're needing to stay stable and upright or not upright are really utilized more. And you develop more of a reflex, like a rough water reflex. So, yeah. Okay, here we go. There's a little trivia peppered in because there are some key differences between if you're code switching between sea and whitewater. Many of you probably know the answer to this, but just as a fun trivia. In whitewater kayaking, which way do you lean when you hit a rock? Do you A, lean into it, B, lean away from it? Gail says, hug the rock, A. Ooh, all right. I guess nobody's gonna go for B. Yeah, so y'all are correct. You want to lean into the rock, right? You want to work with the boat design and the movement of the current to have the water gently flow under our boats so we can move past the rock. If you lean away from the rock, what happens in whitewater? Flip. Yes. Whereas let's say you're just noodling in a sea kayak environment, oftentimes you'll have like a gentle swell wash you up a ledge or a rock face. In that situation, probably best to lean away from it, depend on the muscles. So it's just interesting to see some sea kayakers, their first time on the river, they're like, wait, I'm supposed to be leaning into it? Okay, here we go. Back to our countdown. Number 7, you will build mastery in tide races and current. I sense that this one's pretty self-explanatory, but this is this photo here is lava on the Grand Canyon. I wanted to include it because just like there's expedition sea kayaking or multi-day sea kayaking, there are a lot of opportunities for multi-day whitewater kayaking. And of course, this is one of the epic trophies is Grand Canyon. Trophy in the sense that getting a permit is very hard. But tide races, right? That's a lot of whitewater moves basically in our long sea kayaks in dynamic current, right? So of course these skills are going to translate beautifully between river and sea. It'll make those edge transitions super intuitive. You'll really gain more fluency in spotting micro eddies, especially if you're making attainments in dynamic tide races where you're able to make attainments, or the attainment under the North Tower of the bridge at Lime Point. All of these skills are going to be honed just on basic class 2 whitewater. We're not talking about having to like push yourself beyond a really beyond a certain comfort level. So it also really shows you how to work with the current, not against it. A lot of times as sea kayakers, we're used to the current going both directions. And so we're like, well, I'll just overpower it, right? Like I can overpower it. What's 3 knots? I paddle 4 knots easily. In the river, you can't do that. A lot of rivers are, 8 to, I don't know, sometimes I feel like they're hauling at 20 knots, right? That's like a lot of force, and you're really working smarter and not harder in a lot of those situations. So, Melissa, how about your experience?
I find for me, being a smaller paddler, 5'4", and paddling the same level of whitewater as someone that's, 6'6" and 200 something pounds, I found that I have to be a lot better at reading the water, because it doesn't matter whether it's the sea or the river, it doesn't really care what size you are. And I know oftentimes when I'm scouting a rapid and I watch somebody that's much bigger and heavier than me go through it and maybe be able to take like a really powerful stroke through a hydraulic, or reach over something, or just have more mass where they can take a bigger hit. I find that I've had to get really good at reading the water and reading microcurrents, and knowing how to move my boat, how to develop techniques to be able to move my boat around and use all the smaller currents, and just read things a different way so I can still paddle the same sort of challenging or complex, stronger whitewater than somebody that's much larger than me. So I think that it's a really good skill to develop, and again, translating directly into current, tide races, things like that.
Sweet. Thank you. Okay, this one is super important, and I think, Gail, you touched on this one when we were sharing our experience with when it came to technique. But number 6, whitewater will make your strokes more powerful and more vertical, right? So just by nature of boat design and them being really short and nimble, they're very sensitive, right, to any sort of nuance in your forward stroke, your sweeps, your stern draws. So I find that whitewater boats really keep you honest in a lot of ways, in a way that you can get away with more in a sea kayak where it's longer than just, for example, the forward stroke, right? So uh, with a forward stroke in a small, short whitewater boat, if you're not vertical enough, if your catch isn't as high towards the bow as it needs to be, you're definitely going to struggle and waste a lot more energy, and you're going to miss eddies. You're going to not drive the boat where you need it to be, where you want it to be. You're going to miss waves if you're trying to catch waves and surf waves. You're going to pencil over pour overs, right? So this really is one of the things that I noticed a ton going between sea kayaking, especially when I'm working on surfing and I'm wanting to really, in my sea kayak, drop in super efficiently. My vertical power stroke is really honed through whitewater, just by the nature of the sport and the boats and the design. Something interesting that uh, another instructor, Sammy Hawkins, mentioned is that she stopped talking about and teaching the forward stroke with the name forward stroke. She just calls it the power stroke because it's what you use to power in any direction a lot on the river, and it's also such a stabilizing stroke, so it's empowering from that perspective too. And I really like that, and I think that really encapsulates how whitewater really beefs up and makes you more technical. So yeah. Melissa, would you like to share on that point?
I think you really covered it. But just kind of going back to talking about core engagement and using our whole bodies in terms of making those strokes really efficient. This all comes together, especially in that more powerful forward stroke, those propulsion strokes that we really want to hone in to really move our boats around the water. And it all really goes together, because you can't have a really strong propulsion stroke if you're not engaging your core, which you can kind of get away with if you're in get away with more if you're in a sea kayak as opposed to a squirrely little whitewater boat.
Yeah, the consequences are felt very differently. And And I know we've mentioned a lot about the forward stroke or the power stroke, but I found it across all strokes too, especially like rudders, stern draws, finding how a lot of those turning strokes, where if I make it more vertical, I can find more balance and stability as well. So it's throughout all of your stroke work and your maneuvers where you can really get more feedback on that technique. Um, Sweet. Yeah. For folks who use Greenland blades. Also, I've seen folks bring Greenland blades in the river too. Um, and experiment with different angles. So it's definitely a different style of paddling than I'm used to, but I just wanted to shout out that I've seen people bring Greenland blades on the river. Okay, this is one of my favorites. Uh, number 5. We talk a lot about bomb-proofing your roll. Whitewater will truly bomb-proof your roll. Melissa, do you want to lead us off on this one?
All the things that we were just talking about, surfing, rock gardening, running features consistently, you are going to flip over and you're gonna, and being in a smaller, less stable, kind of squirrely boat, you're gonna flip over a lot in whitewater kayaking, and that's good. Because when you're generally learning in places like we were saying before that are lower consequence, maybe the water's deeper, there's nice pools after rapids, there's pools after surf wave. And so you drop the wrong edge, or you don't read a current right, or you mistime your stroke. And so you're going to flip over again and again and again. And in sea kayaking, you're not being sort of hurtled downstream. And so there's a lot more opportunity for cleanup if you have to wet exit out of your sea kayak. Where in the river, that just gets a little tiring after a while, and having to wet exit every time because there's less of a chance for like a re-entry or things like that from the water. So generally what that means is getting everything over to the side of the river, getting out of the water, dumping the boat out, getting back in, becomes a little bit tiring again and again. And because you are flipping so much, you become a lot more focused on really getting that roll, and you're getting flipped over in so many different ways. You get accustomed to that uncomfort becoming comfortable. I joke and I say that my roll is my best stroke, because when I get flipped over, I don't think about setting up. I can roll from wherever I am in that moment. And, a lot of it comes from, surfing or, being in a hydraulic where you're kind of just getting tossed or ragdolled. But it's, yeah, you want to bomb proof your roll. Spend a little time in whitewater, especially plain, where you are going to get flipped over.
Yeah. And I think too, you really reap the benefits of confidence. Like when you do realize that your role you can trust, it's the best feeling. To Melissa's point about playing and using play as a way to hone that reflex, it just really builds that fluency where you don't even build awareness. Rolling is just like another stroke. It's not like, oh no, I have flipped. Now I will set up. Here I am setting up. Now I am sweeping and rolling up. Right? It's just, it's like unconscious competence. Um, okay. This is Melissa, this photo too. I love this one. This is Melissa charging Cherry Creek or Upper Tuolumne. I think, Melissa, you can describe how beautiful this run is.
Oh man, it is that rapid there is Lemston Falls. It's one of the biggest one on the run, but Cherry Creek, Cherry proper, we call it, is a very classic California class 5 boulder garden. It's 9 miles of just beautiful granite boulders, great big features, big boofs over big pour overs, and it's absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorites. I know that run like the back of my hand. I look forward to it every summer.
Okay. And this is like right down from where our water comes from, right? This is part of the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir system. So we have a question from Jim. Do you always use the forward finishing rolls? I think it's a little different. I think everyone finds what works best for their body, but there's more urgency to roll up faster in Whitewater, especially if it's a shallow moving river or you're in a really sketchy place. So a lot of people will just roll up, build the ability to roll up in a whole bunch of different ways, whether it's forward finishing, whether it's like really quickly, almost like a high brace turned into a little bit of a forward finishing roll. I've seen a lot of different things, but for me, mostly I will just go on to the old sweep roll. Um, Rolling on both sides, I feel like is really beneficial in Whitewater as well. Melissa, do you want to speak to that question?
Generally when I roll up, I'm getting back to the front of my boat. Whitewater boats do want to be, especially the, the modern boat design, they're more, they want to be driven from the front. And so there's an older style of roll that was taught in Whitewater back in the day when boat design was a bit different. But the way the boats are designed now, the other thing too is rolling up and being back forward really helps get you balanced and centered again and ready to do the next thing. But yeah, I try not to get back and I don't want to damage the moneymaker here. So, but the question on the hike-in, Cherry Popper has no hike-in. That's the upper Tuolumne. So you drive to the put on, paddle 9 miles of glory, and then you get out after the last rapid, and there you are. But upper Cherry, the hike-in depends on where you hike in from. There's 2 different hikes. One's 12 miles and one's 9 or 10, depending on if you go from the West Cherry side. And that's a different style. That's the one that's got the slides and the waterfalls on it. Both epic.
Yeah. Oh, I will mention, Melissa brings up the point of boat design. I noticed too, especially as we have more higher volume hulls, which provide a lot more stability. You see fewer and fewer people with C2C rolls being effective, just because getting that to that point of leverage is really hard. So especially in Whitewater, I think if you're looking to learn how to roll or tweak your roll, something that translates well between both environments, a sweep roll will give you a lot more mileage in both environments than a C2C, just by nature of how boat design has changed, especially in Whitewater. They're not like dancers and pirouettes anymore. Okay, another trivia question. So a tea rescue in Whitewater involves the rescuee staying in their boat the entire rescue. True or false? Oh man, you guys can't be stumped. They know too much. Yes, it is true. This is one thing that is funny for sea kayakers doing yes, it's true. It must be true or I wouldn't ask. Yeah, it's like funny to hear whitewater boaters talk about tea rescues all the time, and then you're like, wait, excuse me? That's not a tea rescue. So I try to call it more of a bow rescue, like what we have in both. But I think, at least on the river, for folks who don't do a ton of sea kayaking, it's a tea rescue. So, Mel, were you surprised when you saw our tea rescues on the sea?
A little bit, yeah. Why are they swimming?
All right, it's true. Okay, number 4. develop better water reading, hydrology, scouting, all of these skills. So this is my partner and I, again, a Grand Canyon photo, and we're scouting Crystal Rapid. And it's such a great practice, I think, to get out of your boat, look at the river from different angles, and look at it from not just like, where do I want to go, but try to do a creative mind, like a mental challenge of what's the worst case scenario. And if that happens to me, where will I swim? How will I get out of it? How will I manage it? Right? I think, again, thinking about actual risk versus perceived risk, there's a little bit more of a culture of just like, okay, I think I saw enough sets, let's go. And sea kayaking, where perhaps you're unknowingly embracing more actual risk as opposed to perceived risk than there is in a lot of, especially beginning whitewater, where you're really taking the time to know before you go, so to say. Like in both whitewater and in sea kayaking, one of the frameworks we use a lot when we're looking at a feature or scouting rapids is dorms, right? You're looking at your destination, the obstacles, your routes, your markers, and then thinking from there, how do you best set safety? And I learned that all in whitewater and then applied it to my sea kayaking, especially in dynamic environments, thinking mostly like running features in rock gardens. And it was super helpful to have that framework and to have those skills of scouting that you hone in whitewater. You just translate those to sea kayaking, and you're not unconsciously jumping into risky situations because you haven't really thought through all of these critical details. It also helps you understand holes. Who has gone over a pour over or been in, any sort of interesting feature where you get kind of chundered and like thrown like, oh, end over end, and like, what was that? You were just in a hydraulic, you were just in a hole. And yes, they happen on the sea and in the river. It's just a lot more seldom, so you don't really know how to handle them when you get stuck in one on the other end of a pour over on the sea. Whereas there's lots of holes, both friendly and less friendly on the river, that you can intentionally get practice with. And you can get practice in a pretty low stakes, high reward, low risk environment. So when it happens to you on the sea, you know how to brace out of it. You know how to roll out. You know how to swim out of it even, right? Because you've had that experience, many more opportunities to gain that experience. Mel, I feel like you have a lot to share on this.
Yeah, swimming out of hydraulics.
Yeah.
Going back to playing, the more that you can, get in and play with certain features, you start to learn, it's hard to look at something when it's really abstract and guess how your boat's going to react on it. And so being able to combine the two, the scouting with the action is what's the word I'm looking for? It's what you're going for. Because if you're always just bashing down and reading it quickly or not reading it, and you don't really know what happened, you talk to a lot of newer kayakers and they'll get to the bottom of the rapid and they'll be like, I have no idea what happened. I'm at the bottom. And so combining that with scouting and having this awareness of the features that you're going to be running and making a plan, like, okay, there's this pillow, I'm going to lean this way, I'm going to take a stroke on the right, I'm going to transfer my edge. And you start to make these plans and try to execute it with your boat, and then it works or it doesn't work. And then you have time to evaluate for the next time. And when you look at that same sort of set of features again, okay, well, last time I tried this, that didn't work. Maybe I'll try this time. And, and being able to scout and really understand those hydrodynamics is really going to improve your boat handling. out in the rough water.
And then you get to just use the words hydrology, hydrodynamics as much as possible in both environments.
Yeah, it makes you sound smart, and you know.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. We're getting close to the end here. Number 3, swiftwater rescue and improving just rescue dynamics. So who here has talked about, or sorry, who here has taken a swiftwater rescue course? Okay, awesome. Ooh, cool. All right. Beth, I'm curious, like, would you mind? I'm gonna pick on you, so to say. Beth, would you unmute yourself and just share a little bit more about what you gleaned from your swiftwater rescue experience?
It was super fun. I think the coolest thing was learning how to swim the rapids, that, you weren't gonna die if you ended up swimming something big, and how to do that. And then learning how to use the throw rope too. That was super, super cool.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Gail, do you want to share a little bit? I feel like you've had a lot of experience with swiftwater, whitewater, and sea kayaking. Have you used your swiftwater skills in sea kayaking environments?
Not in the sea kayaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Not in the sea kayaking environment. I used a little bit in some whitewater runs that I did earlier this year. So my experience in the whitewater class it was a little terrifying for me. What I learned was there are certain things or certain roles that I should not play in a rescue. And I learned the things that I could do or could be helpful if somebody needed my help. So I could do basic things like retrieve equipment. I could help a swimmer to an eddy or push or bulldoze a boat to an eddy. But things like pins or trying to get somebody out of a pinning situation just because of my size and strength, I would be more of a hazard than I would be a help. So that was the biggest takeaway for me from the Swiftwater rescue class.
I think that's a really important takeaway. And oftentimes as you take these courses and take them again and again, you find that your role can shift and it can be fluid, and knowing where you can position yourself in a situation is as big of a help as if you were just going to rush in and try to save the day. Because you always want to keep you want to protect your own safety first and foremost. You're number one, right? And so oftentimes these classes give you those tools to know where you're at, and to be able to be involved in a situation and say, okay, I'm going to, be upstream safety, and I'm going to flag anyone down that might be coming into this, and just knowing where to position yourself. And that's often the most help for any kind of rescue situation. And you keep
Yep.
yourself safe.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Henry, anything you'd like to share about your experience doing swiftwater rescue?
I'll just echo Beth. I had like basically the same experience. I think just swimming through the rapids was really confidence inspiring. So
Totally. I think there that I want to clarify that taking a swiftwater rescue course is not like a requirement, especially as you're just getting into whitewater, but it's definitely an accompaniment that quickly becomes a necessity depending on your level. And honestly, even at a beginner level, it's a really helpful way to keep yourself and other people on the river safe, because you never know if you'll need to use these skills, not just to keep you and your friends safe, but if somebody else who maybe is a wreck boater who is out there in an inflatable kayak needs help. And you'll be able to use those skills for other crew and other people as well. But a lot of Swiftwater Rescue, as Gail was mentioning, is touching on like efficient roles and just the group dynamics of a rescue in a way that I find is really helpful to transition and use in sea kayaking rescues as well. One example of this is the role of the incident commander, right? So if you have the group resources where you can assign somebody who is like not involved in any discrete part of the rescue, who can just have that larger, like global view of how it's unfolding and be able to make decisions and have that capacity to not be holding the boat or holding the swimmer or actively doing something in a way that compromises their ability to communicate and assess and reassess. So that's something that really can apply in both situations that quite often you don't see folks doing in sea kayaking. There's more of a culture of everybody needs to like be as active as possible, or there's a lot of people who are checked out and only one person who's like, help, I'm actually the one in the cave helping them, right? Not always the case, but I think I've seen it quite a bit. There's also a good degree of what Beth and Henry were mentioning, swimming. I think we spend a lot of time as sea kayakers prioritizing staying in our boat at all costs and rescuing ourselves, especially with the intention of getting back in our boats, when in a lot of surf and rock gardening and tide race environments, you're often separated from your boat and maybe even in places where you're hard to rescue unless you swim out of it. So having that confidence and knowing the right techniques to be able to swim yourself to safety in dynamic water is a true survival skill. And it will really make you a better rescuee in a lot of different situations. Of course, there's like a lot of cool knots and rope work you get to do where if you really need it, I think you can use it to get your kayaks up a steep embankment if you needed to like take out at one beach that has like a steeper takeout per se. So there's a lot of useful things, not just in terms of like the actual technical skills you learn, but also the group dynamics and just the protocols for those rescues that are helpful. Melissa, do you want to add anything on there?
I think you nailed it. I think you got it all. Because the more practice you have in features and getting in and out of situations and swimming, the more often that you do it, it's just like a paddle stroke. So the more you swim in a quote unquote semi-controlled environment as in a class, you get more accustomed to it. And so when it happens to you by accident, it's not this crazy foreign thing that now you're scared and what do I do? You're like, oh yeah, I've done this, I've practiced this. And just that does a lot for the head game in keeping you calm, cool, and collected in a situation.
Oh, totally. All right, we're almost at the end here. Number 2, I think this is huge. Paddle better with a team and as a team. As we've been touching on, there's a lot of decision making on an individual and on a group level that comes with getting a crew safely down the river. And that's for rivers of all classes, right? And for folks of all skill levels. Uh, Paddling as a responsible team member and working on that communication and that sense for looking after each other is essential in a whitewater environment in a way where you can kind of get away with, in the sea kayaking environment, not being that much of an observant and plugged in team player. I feel like everybody in a whitewater environment needs to have a higher level of awareness, communication, and plugging in to run rivers and rapids successfully and safely. You can see it done like a lot of different ways in both environments, but I think it's a lot more consequential to not paddle as a team in a whitewater environment. Not something as simple as not looking behind you can be super consequential if somebody's pinned in the river, everyone's going down river. that could be a split second that you have the opportunity to notice where they went or where their boat is, right? So constantly building that reflex of keeping your head on a swivel. Melissa, I feel like you do a ton of expedition paddling and you could probably speak to this better than I do as well.
Yeah, I mean, getting really honed in with a team and again being able to replicate that over and over again is really paramount on the river. And it's, you know, the river or the sea, if you're in conditions that could be higher consequence, especially because on the river, when things go wrong, they can go wrong very quickly because the environment is dynamic, you know, even more so than, you know, well, other than, you know, being in currents and stuff like that. It's you're always moving downstream. There's less opportunity to stay connected with your boat or your crew, things like that. There's a lot more things in the river than we find in the sea, not including giant sea animals. But there's there's rock piles of, you know, that are jumbled together that we call sieves, that are super dangerous. There's wood. The photo that Laura pulled up is on the North Fork of the McCollum River. The section is called Fantasy Falls. And you can see that there's a 25-footer behind us with a giant tree in it. And so the consequences of having your line off or flipping in a bad spot can, you know, things can go bad very quickly. And so you really need to develop a level of communication skills as well as trust with your team. And, you know, some of my best friends, we've been on some pretty epic adventures together because we've had to work together to get out of a canyon, get out of a situation. And again, that's, you know, just like practicing your strokes, practicing swimming, practicing your role, practicing working as a team, practicing those communication skills are they're only going to improve your sea kayaking, and especially if you get out in conditions or you're on some longer missions and places where there's current or, you know, tide races, places where you can get separated from your boat and your team. Making sure that you have good plans in place, have good contingency plans, have good plans for communication with the outside. If, you know, you do get separated or something, or, you know, somebody does get injured or worse. So yeah, the team, the team is huge.
Oh my God. Okay. Final number one reason. Y'all, it's fun. It's beautiful out there. Like we got some beautiful vistas, amazing coastline. Don't sleep on these rivers, especially in California, Oregon, Washington. The West Coast has a bounty and a lot of rivers that are more approachable than you think. This is the Rogue River up in Oregon. They have a really long, beautiful class 2, class 3 minus section. And also for us sea kayakers, it's kind of revelatory. You get out after a long day, and if it doesn't smell too bad, you just let it dry and you store it away. It's pretty nice. I feel like I was just at the river this past week, and it was the first time that my dry suit has actually felt fully desalinated in like a year. It was pretty nice. Yeah. Mel, anything to add on this point?
You know, it can take you to such beautiful places, and the same when you're exploring the coastlines and things like that through sea kayaking, rock gardening. Whitewater kayaking can take you into some really extraordinary canyons, and it doesn't have to be the stoutest thing out there, the steepest run, the scariest thing. There's some incredible sections of river that are inaccessible other than by boat. And by boat, if you can navigate it, you know, there's some beautiful class 2, class 3 minus sections that, you know, most of the population of the world will never see. And, you know, you create really great bonds with people, and being able to sleep out on the beach and sleep under the stars, and I don't know.
There are a lot more hot springs in
There
Whitewater,
are,
the
there are
Riverside.
many
than-
hot springs.
Yeah, that's a big draw too. Sweet. All right. Well, that leads to the question, how do I get started? I'm gonna let Mel speak to this one, since she runs our Whitewater program.
Yeah, this photo is a really great example of a section that we teach on. This is a really good place to practice the boof stroke going over a pour over. There's a nice pool leading up to it. You can sit in an eddy, take your time. You can watch the instructors, you can watch other students, pretty low consequence. But we offer, so Cali Collective offers Whitewater classes on the South Fork American. We have clinics going through the summer. On weekends, I know that we do have a special Basque Whitewater 2-day that's going on later in the summer. And then depending on if those couple of days don't work for you, we have a lot of stuff on weekends. If you've never been in a whitewater boat before, we have Whitewater 1, 1, 2, Whitewater 2, 3, and on up, and it sort of correlates with the river classification system. We are actually going to be offering this year some practical safety and rescue skills workshops. It's not a Swiftwater rescue class, so it's not a 2-day certification. It's a single-day workshop where you work on the things that you're going to use most often as a recreational paddler: swimming, dealing with boats, decision-making, stuff that you would see sort of on a normal basis when you're out on the river with your friends. So those are going to be going up on the website this week. We also have a really great online coaching series that we did during COVID times that we put on the website. They're all for free. There's a lot of really cool talks on there. We have one on the forward stroke. We have one on fine-tuning the roll. And then there's just some, the mental game, yoga, things like that. We actually we have a live webinar coming up next week on May 9th. And this is actually muscle repair and recovery for kayakers. You can find if you're on our newsletter list, you would have gotten that. I'm going to be posting something on Facebook and our other outlets. So you can keep an eye out for that, or feel free to email me. And then we also do offer private one-on-one and small group classes if you just want to get together with your friends. Sometimes it's nice if you want to come with other sea kayakers because you're all sort of speaking the same language. Yep. And then Laura just threw up our YouTube channel. We have a really good sweep roll video up. We broke it down last year. And yeah, and then you can just watch some fun kayaking, see what's out there. But yeah, I want to thank you all for having me here. I really appreciate it. I don't get out on the sea nearly as much as I'd like to. In the beginning, Laura and I were at all of each other's classes, but now that both of our programs have become so robust, we don't get to do it so often. So, but feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I'll throw my email up in the chat box, but yeah, I would love to see you all out on the river. Yeah, and feel free to shoot me any kind of questions. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks for having us. And
Yeah.
I also want to call attention, Gail brings up some great points we didn't cover. Your day is not going to be blown if conditions changed, and you don't have to wait for conditions to be right.
Yep.
Avoid this pesky
True.
spring wind, you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
Nice.
Yep. Right on.
Thanks,
All
you
right, well,
guys.
thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you
Bravo,
for
bravo.
having us. I'm going to yield the screen.
Yeah. Thank you so much.